Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sharon Yamato. I'm a writer, filmmaker, coming to you from Los Angeles on Gabrielino Tongva land. And I'm really delighted to spend the next hour talking to one of my favorite people in the entire world. I know, don't laugh, Erin, it's true. But before we start, I'd like to take a minute to thank John Tonai and Kimiko Mar from Tadaima for giving me this opportunity to talk to my sister pal, Erin. I just want to begin by saying I first met Erin in 2018. She doesn't seem like that long ago. It feels like we've known each other forever. She was actually programming for the Minidoka pilgrimage and had invited me to show one of my films. So when I finally met her after 41 emails, I learned that she was a super talented graphic designer who also did the stunning Minidoka graphic designs. One of her other designs is one of my favorites, and that's last year's Tadaima logo. But then after, talking to her briefly about that, where she played it down a lot, that she was a fabulous graphic designer, I came back and I was on Facebook, and I saw that she was the one who was responsible for the art piece that transformed this kind of drab, ugly, I shouldn't say ugly, building in Seattle, which happens to be the home of Densho, into something that was super moving and really important. So that really, like I said, it really blew me away. And so I rather than introduce her with all of her many, many, many awards, installations, all the artist residencies and grants she's gotten, I'm just going to say that Erin, to me, is a creative genius, a totally outspoken activist. And here's a word that I love. She's an abolitionist. And I'm also proud to say that she's my little sis, but keep in mind, Erin has a lot of sisters. So Erin, can I just start with talking a little bit about how and why you made that switch from your great graphic design career to starting to do things on sides of buildings?
Yeah, sure. I was on the East Coast for many years, for school, for undergrad, and trying out different careers like child advocacy, for instance. And then I kind of stumbled into graphic design, luckily, like after undergrad, and really enjoyed that. And was part of the New York hustle and made a lot of friends and gained a lot of skills. And then when it was time to move back home to Seattle at the urging of my partner, who was basically sick of New York City, I just really enjoyed, coming back into the fold of the community. And I had already done some graphic design work, about the experience, including the Minidoka work, as you say, and also various exhibits and things for the Wing Luke, touching on these community stories. And then this really sort of out of the blue other opportunity came from the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, which was this public art boot camp. And I applied and I got in, and I remember just sitting in one of the sessions and thinking to myself, well, I'm going to make public art about our experience, about the JA incarceration experience. This is what I've been wanting to do. And I haven't really been satisfied enough just being the graphic designer on pieces that touched on that history. So, my timing was pretty good with Densho because someone handed off graphic design work to me my friend Paula was kind of done being their graphic designer and introduced me to them. So that's how I started my relationship with Densho. And then they began an artist in residency program, and I was in the first class, and the rest is history.
Well, it's wonderful. I love that image, the Dorothea Lange. So kind of talk to us a little about your thought process when you formulate a concept, like something like this piece, how you came to choose, the images you choose. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how you do it. You can move on to how you do it. So.
Sure. I love looking through the Densho digital archives. There's just so much richness there. And I wasn't necessarily that intimate with that Lange grouping of photographs. So I kind of started to study them, and I found it, interesting and not surprising that that collection itself had sort of been, hidden and erased by the government. And I find that her images of folks, before they go into the camps where there's this heavy feeling of uncertainty and anxiety are very powerful. And so, Natasha Varner at Densho and I looked through a few options, and we know that seeing the faces of children in particular makes a certain impression on people, draws the attention. So that was the one that we went with. And I am really lucky to have this mentor named Chip Thomas, who I've never met. He's a doctor, an MD on the Navajo reservation. He's an African-American man, and I kind of cold called him or cold emailed him because he does these beautiful pieces telling the stories of Indigenous folks that he encounters in this work. And so he's a doctor and public artist. And, he took my email and just gave me all of this really concrete, practical advice about how to put that first piece up. And I just would be nowhere without him. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully helping him put something up in the Portland area later this fall. But he's prolific. I don't really know how he manages his time. That will be something I pick his brain about when I meet him in person. But he was just so generous of spirit in giving me tips, and he's been really encouraging. And I do find that that's sort of the code of the street artist, but Chip Thomas in particular has been my sensei, as I call him.
Yeah, his work is beautiful. I know he does a lot of heads too. These faces, which are so powerful. But more interesting is the technique. Was the technique that he uses, was that, how did you come through it, the technique you used through him, or how did that, and talk a little bit of what that is.
Yeah, sure. It's a technique called wheat paste, and you can literally make a paste out of wheat, though that's not how most of us do it anymore, because it's a little unwieldy. The bugs eat it, but it's like copy paper grade bond paper, these large oversized outputs that are pieced together and then pasted onto the surface of whatever surface. And there's this definite wabi-sabi quality to it. It falls away. It is affected by weather, especially in a place like Seattle, that has quite a bit of rain and moisture. And that is what he mostly installs in. I know he's doing different things now. I've noticed if you look at his Instagram, he has been doing things on fabric scrim and more kind of in exhibit spaces. So he's really moving around quite a lot. I would love to kind of cover a whole building face like he so often does. I'm getting there.
I was going to say, I think you should think about going to one of the campsites and finding one of those old barracks.
Yeah, I shout out to Hanako. I've mentioned it to Hanako before, kind of in passing before she left Minidoka, and there's just it's a delicate structure, and there's lots of rules about applying onto those buildings, but I do think it would be so powerful. So maybe that's for a future conversation.
Well, it is a temporary art process, right? So it's not exactly like it does sort of deteriorate with time, right? And is that something that attracted you or detracted you? Is that something that you wanted, or?
That's a great question. Well, it attracted me because kind of starting out as a public artist, my budgets are small. And so this is literally paper and paste and quite a lot of elbow grease. Very affordable and doable. The hardest thing, I had no idea that the dentro wall was going to be quite so challenging just because of the degree and the height of the wall, and where we were able to get a ladder in there and stuff. But it happened. Although now I sort of have some other tricks under my belt as to how to make these pieces of paper stay up a little longer. It's not just pure paste. There are a few extra ingredients mixed in. So I've had more success keeping some other things up longer. And I've been able to win some grants to run things on vinyl just for a more permanent installation, particularly in Japantown and Seattle. So,
getting back to that technique of wheat paste, though, do you do all of that preparation work yourself? Do you have to mix giant buckets of the stuff and actually apply it to, or do you get help?
I mix it up myself, and then usually have one or more assistants depending on the size. Usually have one, because the pieces are still pretty big, and unwieldy to handle if it's windy. So it does help to have 4 hands kind of aligning things. There's an elaborate kind of hash marking system to kind of line pieces up. And these are all things that Chip totally walked me through. And I like to cut things out. I like to cut the shapes out. So that's all work that I just have to sit in my basement and do. And then hope that I have enough space to kind of stretch things out to really see how they're going to align and work together.
It's great. I'd like to talk more about the whole process of application and all of that, but let's maybe move on to some of your other works. That was pioneering, that first piece at Densho, but kind of walk us through what was next, what came next.
Like I mentioned, I did a couple of pieces in Seattle's Nihon Machi, and those were really done with the grace of community members. The Murakami family is a 3rd generation owner of this particular building down there that houses Kobo at Higo and Itsumono and a few other businesses. And so, Paul and Craig have been really great champions of my work and have asked neighbors if I could paste stuff up. And then I I put an image of their ancestors, two of their aunts who ran the store until they passed away. I put an image of them up as children before they went into Minidoka. And that's been a really nice piece. That the garden is usually locked, but the size of the children is massively large. And so people really see them when they're kind of walking through the alley, and they do have a feeling of protecting the garden and the neighborhood, which is still in a very delicate moment, honestly, just from the anti-Asian xenophobia and everything that's come with that, you know.
Yeah, for those of us who don't live in Seattle, I have the honor of actually seeing it myself. But can you sort of talk a little bit about Nihonmachi there? What? I mean, it's kind of a dying, maybe. Or I shouldn't say that, but do you think this helps sort of give it more life to have your work there? Does it maybe bring a few more people in, or what is Seattle's Nihonmachi like?
Yeah, you know, I feel like these murals have helped to mark the neighborhood, and I've worked on other placemaking projects that are more graphic design related to, you know, mark this alley that we're calling Nihonmachi Alley. And, you know, a lot of us have been engaged in putting on a Japantown festival for these last few summers. I think it's so important to preserve it, and I hold it so dear in my heart because it's, you know, it's the neighborhood that supported my family from the time of immigration. You know, it's where everything happened, just like all the other J towns. Ours happens to just be a couple square blocks. That's what left. And I think that my work is helping to enhance the neighborhood. And it's been great that the Wing Luke Museum has added these pieces onto their tours, especially for students and for out-of-towners, you know, who are not familiar with this history. Because as you know, I have a lot of historic information in everything that I put up. I insist upon it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that really fascinates me about your work. It's the merging of history and art, which I think is super important because art is art. You know, we can't live without art, and so many people try to, but yeah. So I think moving on. I mean, your work has never, because it deals with a part of our own history that's oftentimes neglected or put aside or not wanted to be talked about. So it sometimes opens itself up to controversy, and I hope you can talk about the thing that's probably put your name on the map as far as controversial artists are concerned, and that would be the piece you did in Bellevue. So if you could talk a little bit about the whole origin of that and the evolution of it and the result of it and where it stands today. Got all that.
Sure. Yeah, so the same Dorothea Lange image of those children was requested for a Day of Remembrance piece at Bellevue College. And it was a group of AAPI professors who invited me to put that up. And they specifically wanted, you know, that image and the message. They had seen me speak at a Densho dinner. And so I said, okay, I'm sure I'm going to add history to it, a historic panel, knowing in the back of my mind that I had tried to use the same history in a piece a few months earlier, also in Bellevue at the Bellwether Festival. And it was rather unceremoniously censored so that was the kind of where I was going from. I was trying to really tell the story of Bellevue Japanese Americans who are sort of known for their farming prowess, really cleaning, taking out all the stumps in what is now downtown Bellevue and making it into this completely fertile farmland that fed, the greater Seattle area. So I created some sculptures that honored my parents' trophy shop, their small business that they ran all through my childhood and where my sisters and I worked, while at the same time, talking about these histories, like I said, the strawberry farmers, and then instances such as the fact that my dad was born in camp, and delivered by a horse veterinarian. So back to the Bellevue college scenario, just a few months later, that time the censorship, it wasn't undercover, and it happened in broad daylight. An administrator, a pretty high level administrator of color, went up to the panel and whited out sentences about Miller Freeman, who's one of the founders of Bellevue, and he was just a flat out anti-Asian, anti-Japanese agitator. He wanted to stop immigration of Japanese folks, and he was a vocal proponent of the incarceration. And there was just an immediate uproar on campus. The students and staff of color really stepped up and spoke out and were not gonna, sit down about it. And our tight-knit Nikkei community in the Seattle area also stepped up, and we declined the board of trustees when they offered to kind of have a sort of public event to talk about what had happened, after the administrator and the president both lost their jobs. And we had our own healing ceremony where we honored all of the major camps, and there were survivors, including my dad there. And it was just a moment for us to come together. And for me, it was, it was like seeing the sea of support that folks wanted when the executive order came down. They so wanted to see their allies, really step up. And
I remember reading about it at the time and feeling so proud of you and feeling like, oh, I know Erin and look what she's doing. But the personal cost of being in the middle of that much attention, can you talk a little bit about how you really felt? I mean, was it a moment of sadness? Was it triumph? What kinds of feelings were going through your mind when you were being singled out and literally written about and talked about by people both supportive and, I'm sure, non-supportive? I can only imagine what some of the negative feedback you were getting. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but how were you taking all this?
Yeah, it was difficult. I think that was the moment where I understood for the first time the intergenerational trauma within myself, from this whole experience. Because an erased history was being erased. Again, they were saying that I couldn't tell our history. And it happened twice, I think the first time, in a way, was more difficult because there was so much secrecy, and they never apologized, and it just didn't sit right for me. And I just was kind of hounding and trying to get what I wanted out of these Bellevue officials. And then the second time, I think, like I mentioned, I think it did provide some closure and healing, because the community was there with me, walking with me. And we could also see that a lot of other folks saw us, and saw how this history connects to the other histories of Black, Indigenous people of color in this country. Like I feel like there's a little bit of a missing understanding with a lot of people regarding that.
Yeah, I really want to talk about your connection to other, I guess, oppressed people, because there's such a strong one. But just to finish off the Bellevue story, so those two people responsible, who we're really not sure who was responsible for wiping out that sentence about Morris Freeman, do you to this day know who did it and how it happened? Or
from what I understand, it really was this vice president for development who did it by her own hand. She didn't point the finger at anyone else on her staff, but I never got to talk to her. I mean, they canned her pretty quickly. And I think we emailed, and I just said, I just want to know why you did it. And of course, didn't get an answer. And I've asked the same question of the Bellevue city officials regarding the Bellwether Festival, and has not been forthcoming either.
Are they following up in any way? Is there any kind of follow-up? Like, I know you're having another festival coming up. Is that?
Yeah, there's going to be a discussion about censorship, so we'll go there. But we had some conversations with JCL Seattle. They very kindly brokered these conversations between me and two other artists that were censored in that cycle of a festival. All of us, because we were speaking about, anti-Asian xenophobia, basically. Another person about the Miller Freeman and his agitation, and another just talking about anti-Asian actions in the city of Bellevue. So we'll see if there's any truth and reconciliation at our panel discussion.
Well, I think I guess if you can say anything good coming from it, is that it probably has made you even more combative, or the wrong word, more like trying to get the word out. And I love the fact that, again, you managed to use our experience to connect with other people who have been put in very similar, if not worse, situations. And it's really an interesting thing, because I think Japanese Americans tend to be very, insular, and, we've all been, well, for good reason. I think we're all self-protective, but now the urge is to try to help other people who have suffered far more than we have. And I don't know, how did that start for you? Where did that come from? I'm sure you've always felt it, but when did you feel like your art needed to reach more, just reach out toward other, minority groups, I guess is not a word, but others who've been oppressed?
Yeah, I think once I became comfortable telling our story, and gained, a degree of trust being back in the community, it just became so clear to me through the work of Tsudu and our other, folks doing this work, Densho too, that there's total connections between the other things that are happening, right? And that have always happened, this obsession with incarcerating brown and black bodies, and the same brown and black bodies that have built this country, like that do the labor to make this country go. And I just didn't see any reason why our story should be apart from those, and the reason why it's apart is because, right, of the supremacist machine, trying to pit us against each other. So I've just been really focused on trying to draw those connections. After the uprisings, again, the Murakami family on that same building that I've done so much work around invited me to put up a mural on the boards, the whole neighborhood boarded up again because of xenophobia and because the mayor decided to route all the protests to filter back into our neighborhood, the Chinatown International District. So there was just a lot of damage done and a lot of fear that the building owners and business owners had to deal with. So I knew, that I wanted to do a solidarity piece because as you can see in this image, the boarded up neighborhoods looked exactly the same as they did when the Japanese American community was carted off. I mean, it was eerie, especially because the Murakami's building is, takes up this whole block and is still standing in this with the same bones that it's always had. So my buddy Scott McCall and I put together a concept that was like a shrine, a Shinto shrine to healing, and it also has a bit of Chicano flavor because he's Chicano. And I still implemented, wheat paste into it by showing some portraits of the slain community members, and it was great. It was a real community lift. We had lots of people come out. It took about a week to put up, and I think it was a great opportunity also to be in conversation with people who came by this very busy urban street, and just had a lot of complicated feelings about what was going on. And was it a moment of reckoning, or, can we do something about it? We had a lot of intense conversations with people.
Like what would say, what was one of your most negative comments about?
It wasn't negative per se, but the guy was just like, you think this is going to help? You think anything is going to change? He wasn't ready to receive it as an offering, as I think, us putting out our hand and trying to make the connection. And, and I get it. It's people's experiences are dramatically different. And so as long as I think, I just want people to think about it, think about the possibility of us coming together and really understanding how interconnected we are.
Mm-hmm. I speak kind of shamefully my own personal history of, racism in my family. And I know Japanese Americans can sometimes, like I said, be kind of insular. But do you feel like you get that at all from the community, or is the community then 100% supportive of your reaching out, crossing racial lines and talking more about the big we, we're all in it together? Is that something that you feel you're getting a lot of support for? Or do you feel like that's another way you're kind of breaking down traditional barriers? Do you feel that in our community at all, or do you feel like 100% supported?
I think for the most part, I've had support in this work, you know, and people like my parents who are yonsei have really, really thanked me and others doing this work for engaging them, or, you know, giving them this opportunity to really think about things differently. And on the other hand, I have encountered a lot of not ill will toward me, but just sort of this baked in disbelief, you know. There's a lot of feeling that Black folks took from JA folks, you know, when we were incarcerated. You know, we shared the same red line neighborhood, the Central District, for a lot of these communities' existences. And I don't exactly know what those stories are, but I know that there are real stories of families, you know, helping each other and taking care of each other. So it's certainly complicated. I think wounds run really deep. And yeah, I've had pushback, but I think it's part of my work to just keep on saying what I want to say.
Yeah, that's, I guess, is a good time to talk a little bit about your ancestors, because I find it terrific that you were able to talk to them. Can you kind of walk us through how that happened, and also just in terms of how expressive were they? How much did you get into the more sensitive issues of having lived pre-war or during the war or shortly thereafter? I mean, how much were they able to talk about it?
Mm. Yeah, I approached both of my grandmothers in 8th grade when I, you know, flipped open the Washington State history book to the World War II section and found a single paragraph about this history. And I, you know, maybe that was a dawning moment. But my mom had always been pretty good about kind of letting us know, like we went to that first day of remembrance that Frank Abe and others organized. So, you know, we were there in body, but it takes a minute to understand, oh, Dad was born in a camp, and oh, everyone was locked up. You know, it's just obviously it takes more than a paragraph to really string it together. So, you know, I didn't know that it was such a big deal that both of my grandmothers were willing to talk about it. And yeah, I hope I still have those audio tapes. I need to get them digitized. It was very sort of matter of fact information about what life was like. You know, in some ways it was that sort of typical thing, like we had to stuff our mattresses with straw, and we had to share these terrible latrines in the dining halls. So maybe not so much detail. My mom's mom, Mitsuko, does talk about how she was matched in camp. And so she was hanging the laundry one day and saw her future husband peeking at her through the laundry line. And I know that my dad's mom delivered baby formula on the block. She always worked. She had 2 kids going into camp, and then she had my father. But my grandfather was really broken by the experience and refused to do one of those, you know, no paying jobs. And so she just really had to step up, 3 kids or not. And the other thing I really remember about those interviews is that they were not bitter and angry. I mean, I feel like I'm more bitter and angry about the experience on behalf of them, you know. They just really survived. They survived for their futures, you know, for their kids and kids to come. So I miss them a lot. I wonder what they would think of all of this.
That's a good question. So, so getting down to your parents, though, your father obviously doesn't remember much. He was born in camp, but do you think that some of the work that you do is kind of the impetus for it comes from a little bit from your parents, a lot from your parents? What's the connection between you and them as far as your work goes, and how excited are they about you doing this now, as opposed to exploring a lucrative career in New York City?
First of all, it was not that lucrative. Secondly, my mom, is kind of a person who could have been an artist. She, and then so was her dad, and so was my dad's dad, who I mentioned. He went to architecture school at the UW in the 1920s. So I do think there was, some art in the family blood. And that was definitely something that my mom encouraged in me as a hobby from forever. And my mom was so pleased when I figured out that graphic design was a thing and a job. And I think coming back home and being able to go on pilgrimage with them has been a powerful experience for all of us. And I know that they've been really pleased that I've been doing that work. And so I think that this public artwork is kind of an extension, everything is related and informs my work. I mean, you know how it is that you talk to so many people and hear so many stories, of course, because there's like 120,000 of them, and we're only scratching the surface. It's incredible. The connections are incredible. And I keep encountering that. Like the more I do, I receive emails from people and hear just nice things about my family and remembrances and then also people's personal stories. So it's very gratifying.
I'm sure. And then moving on, because I think I'm familiar with your latest work, which kind of reaches back to our cultural roots more so than some of your camp-related stuff. It's an interesting combination of things. I'm wondering where that came from. How did that start? Where did you figure out that maybe Japan had some influence on us? Is the culture of Japan maybe has had some influence on your work?
Oh yeah, sure. I think I've been playing with that idea or leaning into cultural reclamation for a while. And I see that my, other fellow yonsei artist siblings are also doing this investigation with trying to learn Japanese and also trying to understand different techniques. And it's been wonderful. I mean, there's just no shortage of incredible cultural aspects to our heritage. There's just a special word for every single little thing. Yeah, I had a great opportunity thanks to you. You shared with me that the JACCC in LA was looking for artists who wanted to work with the theme of kintsugi, which is the art of golden pottery repair, kind of using golden lacquer to fit together and save a piece of pottery. And that was just a great experience for me, not only because I had to make a film, which was a first time for me, but because I got to really explore the ideas of repair in our community, that I'd been thinking a lot about healing from this trauma, and then also how to bridge that with the Black community and how we can compare the redress that we won to the fight for Black reparations, and what stake we have in that and what stake we should have in it. So that's just a little preview of that piece, which is hopefully coming out soon. And I can't wait to see. There were, I think, 5 artists total, and we each produced a film. So stay tuned for that.
I do want to mention too, because there's a piece right behind you. It also seems very heavily Japanese rooted influence, because obviously that's the name of the project as well. But it's nice that you were able to combine all of those things, and I'm sure that was all going through your head when you came up with it. But it's a wonderful amalgamation of everything that you've been working on up to now, which leads us into the next thing that really caught my eye when I saw it, and that is this wonderful community, another public art piece that you did with, it looks like a lot of help, but can you describe what that project was and what the process was?
Sure. That was a commission that I won from the U District Partnership, which is the neighborhood that the University of Washington resides in. And my friend Jacqueline Wu saw, people are so nice. They see these listings and send them to me. I'm so grateful for that. So she was actually the one who suggested, oh, you should tell the story of the Nikkei students, who had to leave campus during World War II. And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. So that's what I applied with. And, there had been a ceremony for those students, I think in the 80s. I wasn't here for it, but I thought it would just be a great thing for these current day students to see, again, especially in this moment of anti-Asian xenophobia. So it was originally supposed to be about 1/3 of the size, and there were some mix up or shenanigans about the wall I was assigned. So I ended up on a giant wall that required a lift, and I had a couple of people with me, my friend Finesse and my new Nikkei friend Tom, all 4 days. And then we had just a bunch of community help. There was a kind of a structured community paint day, but then I had family friends show up a few times and help me bang out this 100-foot by 30-foot wall. And I hope it does the story justice. I think, just, like I said before, anytime I think I can create a place for people to just get a glimpse of these histories, these hidden histories, that's when I know I'm doing my work.
Well, I think what's so eye-catching to me is the use of color. You brought that in kind of starkly. Was that intended to draw attention, or how? Is that something you're going more toward, the use of color, or?
Yeah, well, trying to kind of expand out from just the wheat paste work. I've been, working on my painting skills. I don't really have any training, but yeah, I knew that particular piece had to have an element of hope, and attractiveness that highlights those young lives that were interrupted. And I think all of my work, I try to, strike that balance between telling this difficult history and then celebrating the resilience of our community. Most of us luckily survived. Not completely without damage, but it's a very impressive, triumphant story, in my opinion.
And maybe this is a good time to talk about the wonderful people that are around you, that surround you when you do these pieces, that you kind of have to have. And how does that come about? Do they just because, oh, I know Erin, I think I'm going to go help her. How do you gather all these people together and make them work their little tails off? What do you do? What do you offer them? A lot of sushi or something?
A lot of coffee and cheap takeout in the case of that last mural. No, I mean, well, like the person who photographs all my work, who I call Uncle Eugene in all of my social media posts, is someone who I met doing pilgrimage work. He's also a survivor. He was born at Puyallup Assembly Center, and he is just so energetic and tireless. I mean, he comes and shoots every single one of my projects, and we've developed a really great friendship, and I love him a lot. And then, you know, every time we kind of have these events where there is the possibility for a community to help us, we realize like, oh man, it's just people love to paint and people love to be part of something. It's fun, it's easy, it's like been perfect for the pandemic. People will just stop by or see that it's happening on the socials. And thank goodness, you know, it takes quite a lot of elbow grease to cover these big walls. So it's fun. It's fun to be able to share the process with other people.
Yeah, I would think that that's one of the you know, things about mural art that is just so special, that you can't do it in a studio by yourself. You're out there, everybody sees you, and it sort of ties in with your whole environment, your whole community right there. And you have to talk to these people too, I imagine.
Yeah, it's great actually. In the case of the UW Nikkei mural, you know, a couple different strangers walked up to me after seeing their relatives' names on the list, because I list all of the names, and you know, one of them in tears because she didn't know, you know, and I didn't know that one of my great uncles had started as a med student and then never went back to finish that degree. You know, he did pharmacy, but you know, there are dozens of stories within all of these. So
yeah, and it's also a small JA world. Thank goodness we get to connect to each other. We're all related, sis, right?
That's right.
So just to close out, can you talk to us a little bit about what's next, or what's now and what's next?
Sure. So I have some work up at the Pacific Bonsai Museum, and I think we have probably a little over a month left on that work. It was a beautiful place to install. My first time installing kind of in a beautiful forested environment. Some of the families involved in, you know, bonsai practice in the community, and then some just favorite historic images. And I am teaching a mural class right now, and we'll be creating a large mural with 3 young artists that are with a program called Youth Care that serves formerly houseless youth, and that's sponsored by the city of Seattle. And yeah, I don't know, I have some applications in for artist residencies next year. I thought it was so rejuvenating to be away this past February for a month it's where I started the piece behind me that, you know, became part of the Kintsugi film. It was so powerful to have time to really slow down and hear myself think, and figure out what to do next. So I'm looking for another opportunity to do that.
It's wonderful, Erin. I do know that you generally don't sit down for very long. You're always running around, so I know that you're always busy, but we're the benefactors of all of that, and wanted to thank you very much. This has been the most fun for me. I don't know about everyone out there, but this is the opportunity that you get to ask questions. It's really a a delightful thing. So I hope you have some. So we're opening up for anybody who'd like to ask or comment. Your comments and questions are most welcome. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you, Sharon, and thanks, Kimiko and Caroline and everybody.
So we're back. In case you didn't notice, we've been commenting on the comment list because we've been able to sit back and watch that as well. But this is the live portion of the program, and you guys can all help by asking questions. I am going to go over some of the ones that were already asked and not answered, starting with the fabulous Biff, we are now going to call the answer to your question, Biff, which is what was your first aha moment when going back to a camp, any camp?
Yeah, I just really was struck by the power of the place, being on that sacred land that I know, that all of my relatives walked on. And I was nervous about it. I remember the first time I went onto the Minidoka site. So I don't know, Biff, if that's an aha, but I remember feeling the importance of it, in my flesh and my bones. And being really grateful that I was there with my parents that first time, that we were experiencing it together and that we were experiencing it with a loving community as well. I think that was equally powerful.
I'm going to add, because my aha moment was definitely a life-changing event when I first went to Heart Mountain. I would really encourage everyone who hasn't been to an actual campsite. I think it's so important. There's nothing like seeing the desolation, the dust, the dirt, everything that comes up, the feelings that come up when you realize that this was where your parents spent a good 3-4 years of their lives. So I just want to stick that in as my perspective. But I think we've all had that. I think any of us, and you're so involved with Minidoka still. I know that there's some things that we haven't talked about, and I would love to have your comments on what's going on there now, what the Minidoka community is facing at the moment with the project that's being proposed on that site.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. There's a large wind farm project that is in the proposal stage right now, and it's really crucial that all of us in the community write in with our opposition of this 400 windmill tower monstrosity situation that is going to threaten the cultural fabric of the landscape and threaten the sacredness of our land and our future experiences on that site. These are going to be up to 700 feet tall, which is taller than the Space Needle, for those of you in Seattle, taller than the Washington Monument for East Coast reference. Noisy, lit at night, going to affect wildlife. But what we in the JA community can speak to, I think, most powerfully is just our experience of our ancestors being, unconstitutionally incarcerated. And it doesn't matter if your family was not incarcerated at Minidoka. I think it's all hands on deck, as Biff has said correctly. And the comments are due on October 20th, I think. And you can find information about how to submit a comment on the Minidoka Pilgrimage site, on the Friends of Minidoka site, and a number of places. You can email me personally. And also Tadaima produced a really great couple of sessions on giving a backdrop to this story and the best ways to submit comment.
Thanks, Erin. That's a nice capsule summary of what's going on these campsites. I know there's all kinds of things because the sites that these camps are on are so fluid, and there's another controversy going on now at the Topaz site where a memorial for the Wakasa family, for the gentleman who was killed at that site, a memorial was dug up very unceremoniously. And I think that those are kinds of things that we all have to be concerned about, because we're really trying to preserve this history. And I think we can all do our part by, voicing any kind of, writing a letter or staying tuned to what's going on at these various campsites. Really important. So thanks for your involvement in the whole wind tunnel issue. So to change subjects, because I love this question from Ken Mochizuki about, and I'm going to let you answer this first. How many times have you been asked when you are going to get a real job? We want to hear your reply each time.
Oh, Ken, how many times have you been asked? I haven't been asked that, because I came out. I mean, I'm kind of just wrapping up being a commercial artist, which is this way that people like to divide the arts. So kind of being a public artist is very new for me. So I have never been asked that question, Ken Mochizuki. That's my. What about you, Sharon?
Well, Ken, I have to agree. And mainly it's because I probably never have had a real job. So my family may have been pleased. Well, I guess pleased may be too strong. May have not noticed a difference when I started working on camp stories, which is what happened. Actually, the first time I saw Art Mountain, I said, I've got to write about this. I think we are all struggling to, make a living, but also to, define who we are. And I think that's the thing that really hit me. And I've always struggled financially. So it's nothing new really to me. I'm trying to think if I've had a response. One of the bad things about my situation is that my family really, because I'm the youngest of 9 children, and they were all in camp, and they are very reluctant to talk about it. And I honestly think they think I'm a little weird for even bringing it up. So they're not as committed to the work that I'm doing as I am by any stretch. But I guess I feel it's important enough that we really need to keep talking about it. I think history is so important. And even though history is a dying kind of, now what do you call it? A dying kind of socio-political thing. I think more of us are interested in the present and the future, that we lose sight of our history. And I think that's really important. I think that's why Erin's art is so important, because it captures our history in such a present day way. So let's see, I'm just gonna go on because I want to ask, Biff is really kind of asking some pretty complex questions that I know Erin mentioned in the comment section that it was probably too hard to answer. But he said something about the fact that he's really curious about things that resonate with artists. Do you have a comment on that? That can be done in a very short time, since we've already gone over our time and we're probably going to be closing up soon.
I find inspiration in everything about this experience, honestly. So I'm lucky. I think that's my North Star, telling these stories. And again, as I mentioned in the talk, there's no shortage of them. There's also no shortage of kind of the need to unearth things that haven't been spoken or that, have been hidden and erased. So that would be my short answer. What about you, Sharon?
well, again, I just think it's so important that that we're dealing with what we're dealing with, and that we're bringing this up. In fact, John asks another question that probably maybe we can end with, and that is, I don't know if you can cite a specific individual who I think we should say responded, well, positively or negatively, but maybe we should end on a positive note. Do you remember any specific instances of someone who's responded very positively to your murals, and kind of what makes you feel good, Erin? What makes you want to continue doing what you do?
You know, I just have had a lot of people thank me for telling the story, period. And I think even just using that very simple image of the two children going into Turlock, the Lang photo that appeared at Densho and Bellevue College, I think it's an emotional piece, and people are grateful that it's out there in the public space. That's sort of a quick answer.
Do you want to even address the issue of the negative feedback you've gotten?
I haven't gotten that much negative. I mean, aside from being censored, you know, like there's nothing more negative than like being silenced. Other negative feedback? No, generally I don't. I mean, sometimes murals get vandalized, but I don't think any of it has been pointedly racist in any way. I think it's mostly just like kids messing around, and I'm grateful for that. You know, that it's not a little more draconian.
And this might be a good time to mention the session you had with the city of Bellevue a few days ago, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what that was and what the reaction to it was, and how you are continuing to deal with the whole issue of censorship.
Yeah. Shoot, I should have put a link in the chat. I don't have one on me right now, but we talked about those two incidences in Bellevue, and one thing we did was one of the other artists who had been censored at the Bellwether Festival, he and I created a wished for apology that we had wanted to receive from the Bellwether people, and he went up and performed it as a city official. I kind of just nudged him onto the stage before we talked, and he sort of fooled people. That was the first thing. And the second thing was that my friend Tillman Smith was in the audience, and she, at the end of our session, sort of talking about all these different times that Anita and I had been silenced and censored, Tillman sort of turned to the audience and said, you know I was moved by this conversation, and I see that there are a lot of Bellevue officials in the audience, and I'm just really curious, what do you think about it? And the mayor of Bellevue came up to the podium and was quite emotional, and she said, I thought that was one of my people giving that apology, and I want to sign it. I mean, I want to take ownership of that apology. So that was like one of the biggest takeaways. It was kind of manifested the apology that we had been waiting for years to receive. So yeah, you can find recording of that talk on the Bellwether site if you are so interested.
I watched it and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. So I hope those of you who are listening today can tune in, because it's really fascinating. It's such a controversial and inflammatory situation that you were put in. So, good. Thank you for posting that. It must have been Kimiko, but yeah, I really encourage everybody to watch it. It's really exciting. It's dramatic. And it also makes you feel very proud of Erin for participating so openly with it, because I think one of the things that I find artists have, you know, when you're embroiled in controversy and you have to like stick your necks out, it's what kinds of things you feel free to speak about without, you know, especially because as Japanese Americans, we really don't like to offend people. At least I try not to too much, although sometimes I can't help myself. And I wonder, Erin, how you deal with that.
You know, well, I'm so late to this chapter in my career. You know, I really literally just started doing public art in 2018. And I know that I'm not a great artist. The main point, the first thing about my work is to tell the story and to talk about the way that our story is interconnected with other stories of brown and Black people. And that's what I'm rooted in. I don't, I don't have ego. I don't think I'm going to become a world famous artist shown in the MoMA. It's just not, it's not what I'm going for. So I think it's being really grounded in that knowledge, like what my priorities are, has allowed me to just to be a thorn in the side of Bellevue in particular, and just to keep saying, to keep truth telling the way that I want to. I just don't have anything to lose. So
I love that. I know, because art can be politics and politics can be art. And I think that we all try very hard to avoid the politics, but sometimes it's inevitable. But I think I feel the fact that if you stay true to yourself, you can do just that, and that's avoid the politics. And I appreciate that about you, Erin, so much. So we're getting such nice comments. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for listening in. I am, I can listen to Erin talk for hours, and I think we've exceeded our hour here. So I hope, you guys got something out of it, and I hope you tune in for other Tadaima programs, which are just amazing. Again, Kimiko, which we all know, is responsible in part. She has an incredible staff, and we really have a lot of people to thank for putting this thing together, which looks rather easy, but I think it was more difficult than it appears. So I don't know, Erin, if you have any closing remarks, but
no. Thanks. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thanks, Kimiko and Caroline and the whole Tadaima crew.
Yeah, so thank you again, and thanks everyone for listening. And we're going to sign off with smiles on our faces. So